In 2007, a magnitude 8 earthquake tore through Pisco, Peru. Modern concrete buildings pancaked into rubble. Around 500 people died. An entire city stood there helpless, waiting for trucks to bring them water. Now walk a few hours inland, into the Andes, to walls a local people stacked 500 years before that quake. No cement, no steel, no warning system. The same shaking that just flattened modern concrete has hit those ancient stones over and over. They don't fall. They almost never do. We like to believe the ancient world was fragile, that without our machines, they were just victims waiting for the next flood or fire or quake to wipe them out. The truth is almost the exact opposite. Again and again, they survived disasters better than we would. Not because they had more technology than us, because they had less. And the instinct that saved them? You're using a weaker version of it right now. That uneasy feeling before a storm you can't explain. Your ancestors trusted that feeling. Most of us buried it. This is a channel about why we're like this. The strange, stubborn wiring we inherited from 100,000 years of ancestors who had to read the world to stay alive. If that's your kind of thing, subscribe, because we do this every week. Now let me show you the warning system your great-great-grandparents could feel in their bones. Start with the moments before a disaster, because that's where the old world had its biggest edge. Over and over in the historical record, you find the same eerie detail. Before a great wave, before the earth moved, the animals knew first. And the people who lived close to those animals learned to read them like a dashboard. This isn't folklore. Let me take you to one beach on one morning. Yala National Park, on the southeast coast of Sri Lanka. The 26th of December, 2004. About an hour before the tsunami arrived, the elephants of Yala did something the keepers had never seen. They turned and walked, fast, away from the shore and up into the high ground. Flamingos lifted off and flew inland. Dogs refused to go down onto the sand. Then the wave came. Along that coastline, roughly 22,000 people died. And when rangers went back into the park afterward, looking for the bodies of the animals, they found almost nothing. No dead wild elephants, no dead deer, no dead monkeys, just 2 water buffalo. An entire wilderness of animals had felt it coming and left. So how did they know? Deep in the soft pads of an elephant's feet are tiny pressure sensors, and they pick up the low rumble of the ground moving through the soil, long before that vibration is strong enough for a human being to feel it. The animals weren't being mystical. They were reading a signal that was really there. And for most of human history, we lived close enough to them to read it too. We didn't only borrow the warning from animals. Sometimes we carried it ourselves, inside a single, unforgettable word. Off the coast of Thailand and Myanmar live a sea nomad people called the Moken. They hand down a piece of knowledge from parent to child about something they call the laboon. The word means, roughly, the wave that eats people. And the rule is simple and life-saving. If the sea suddenly pulls back fast, and you see a line of white on the horizon, the laboon is coming. Do not wait. Run to the highest ground you can find. On that same December morning in 2004, the Moken living on the Surin Islands saw the sea retreat. They didn't stand and stare. They grabbed their children, climbed the hills, and even ran to warn the tourists nearby. Out of about 184 Moken on those islands, the number who died was 0. Not a fluke. A story, doing exactly the job it had been designed to do for who knows how many generations. And here's the part that makes it personal. Remember that uneasy feeling I mentioned at the start? The one before a storm you can't explain? This is where it comes from. That elephant reading the ground, that Moken reading the sea, that isn't a superpower they had and you don't. It's the same instrument, still bolted into you. The shift in the wind, the pressure that presses on your ears. You felt a flicker of it. Ancient people didn't dismiss that flicker. They obeyed it. We're the ones who lost it. Move a person into a sealed apartment under artificial light with a screen that tells them what tomorrow will bring, and slowly the instrument goes quiet. The signal is still being sent. We just stopped listening. So the ancient world's first line of defense wasn't a wall or a machine. It was attention. But attention only buys you a warning. The real question is what you do with the time it gives you. And that's where they built things that still shame our engineers today. Go back to those Andean walls that didn't fall. The Inca, the empire that ruled the mountains of Peru, cut enormous stones, some weighing more than a car, and fit them together so precisely that you cannot slide a sheet of paper into the seams. No mortar, no cement, just stone locked against stone. At a fortress called Sacsayhuaman, which you say roughly as Sacsayhuaman. Some of those blocks weigh over 100 tons, and they've held their shape for more than 5 centuries. Why does that survive earthquakes when a modern brick wall does not? When the ground shakes, those tightly fitted stones can move. Each block shifts a little, absorbs the energy, and then settles back into place when the shaking stops. Engineers today call it earthquake damping. The Inca called it building. When the Spanish arrived and built their heavy, rigid churches on top of Inca foundations, the earthquakes came, and it was the new construction that crumbled. The old stones underneath simply held. And this wasn't just one clever culture. Fly to Japan and look up at one of its 5-story wooden pagodas. Some, like the one at a temple called Horyuji, have been standing since the 700s, more than 1,300 years, in one of the most earthquake-prone places on Earth. And here's the astonishing part. In all of recorded Japanese history, almost no 5-story pagoda has ever collapsed in an earthquake. Almost none. Ever. The secret is hidden right up the middle of the tower. Running through the center of the pagoda is a single massive pillar called the Shinbashira. And the trick is that this central pillar is not rigidly bolted to the floors around it. It hangs, almost free, like the pendulum of a clock. When the earthquake shoves the building one way, the heavy central pillar swings the other way and cancels out something like half of the sway. The whole tower does a slow, controlled snake dance and stays standing. The builders had no physics equations, no computers, just centuries of watching what fell and what didn't. And if you think that's ancient history with no bearing on us, look at the Tokyo Skytree, finished in 2012. It stands 634 meters tall, one of the tallest towers on the planet, packed with modern engineering. And at its heart, the designers used a central column that moves independently to counter the sway in an earthquake. It's the Shinbashira. The same idea from a 1,300-year-old wooden pagoda scaled up into a steel giant. The ancients didn't just survive, they taught us. Do you see the pattern forming? Stone in Peru, wood in Japan, different continents, different materials, one identical idea. Don't try to be stronger than the earthquake. You will lose. Move with it. Flexibility over force. Bend, don't break. And once they'd mastered the buildings, they turned to something far more ambitious. They started re-engineering the landscape itself. Water is the disaster that kills the most people. Too much of it, and you drown. Too little, and you starve. So the great achievement of the ancient world was learning to control where water went, and when. Start in the deserts of Persia, in what's now Iran, more than 2,500 years ago. There was water, but it was locked in the mountains, miles away, and anything you tried to carry across the open desert would simply evaporate in the sun, so they built the qanat, a gently sloping underground channel, dug by hand, sometimes running for tens of miles, carrying cool mountain water beneath the desert so it can't evaporate away. Some of these tunnels have carried water continuously for over 1,000 years, turning a dead landscape into farmland with no pumps, no power, nothing but gravity, and an almost insane patience. Now let me show you what might be the single most impressive piece of ancient engineering still working on Earth today. Travel to Sichuan in southwestern China to a place called Dujiangyan. In the year 256, before the Common Era, a governor named Li Bing faced a river that flooded and destroyed his people's farms every single year. The obvious answer, then and now, would be to throw a dam across it. Li Bing didn't build a dam. He split the river. He built a levee shaped like a fish's mouth right in the middle of the current, dividing the flow into 2 channels, an inner one to feed the farmland and an outer one to carry the dangerous floodwater safely away. He added a weir that uses the river's own spin to fling silt and gravel back out so the channels never clog. No dam, no wall fighting the water. Just a design that guides the river into doing what people needed. Here's the number that should stop you cold. That system was finished about 2,280 years ago. It is older than the Great Wall of China, and it is not a ruin. It is still fully operational right now, this year, watering roughly 667,000 hectares of farmland and supplying water to around 23 million people. 23 million. An irrigation system designed before the Roman Empire existed is, at this moment, keeping the water flowing to a population larger than most countries. That is what the ancient world could do when it worked with a force of nature instead of against it. Now go to the mountains, where the problem is the opposite. Rain falls hard, and it wants to rush straight downhill, tearing the soil away with it. The answer was the terrace. From the rice terraces of the Philippines to the stepped fields of Machu Picchu, ancient farmers carved the mountainsides into giant staircases. A terrace takes a violent downhill rush of water and breaks it into a calm series of steps. Each level catches the rain, lets it soak in, and passes only the gentle overflow to the level below. It's flood control disguised as a farm. And then there's the disaster we're worst at handling today: fire. For tens of thousands of years, Aboriginal Australians and Indigenous peoples across what's now California did something that sounds backwards. To prevent catastrophic wildfires, they lit fires. Small, deliberate, cool-burning fires set in the right season that cleared out the dead brush and dry undergrowth. Do that regularly, and there's never enough fuel lying around for a monster blaze to build. They called it caring for country. Then modern policy came in and said, stop all fire, put every flame out, and the dead fuel piled up on the forest floor for decades. We are now living with the result, watching entire towns burn, and many fire scientists now agree that the people who lit those small fires had it right all along. Look at the pattern here. A qanat, a river split in two, a terrace, a controlled burn. None of it is high technology. All of it is deep understanding of a place, applied with patience across generations. But a system like Dujiangyan takes an entire population working together for years, which brings us to the real secret weapon of the ancient world. It wasn't a tool at all. It was each other. Here's a question. If your civilization has no written records, how do you warn your great-great-grandchildren about a disaster that only happens once every few hundred years, or even once every few thousand? You turn it into a story, and you make the story impossible to forget. Off the coast of Japan, there are old stone markers set into hillsides, some of them centuries old, carved with a warning to the people below. Do not build your home past this point. This is how far the wave reached. Villages that listened to the stones survived. Villages that forgot and built their houses down by the beautiful water did not. But if you want to see just how far human memory can reach, go to Oregon, to a lake so blue it doesn't look real, sitting inside the collapsed crater of a mountain. It's called Crater Lake. And the Klamath, the native people of that region, tell a story about how it was born. In the legend, two spirits go to war. Skell, a spirit of the sky, battles Lao, a spirit who lives inside the mountain. The mountain roars with fire, and in the end it collapses in on itself, and the great pit that's left fills slowly with water. For a long time that was just a myth. Then geologists studied the mountain, which they call Mount Mazama, and they found that it really did erupt and collapse in an enormous explosion, forming the crater that became the lake. When did that happen? About 7,700 years ago. Let that sink in. And then here's the detail that turns a nice coincidence into something staggering. Archaeologists digging in the area found a pair of sandals woven from sagebrush bark, buried underneath the layer of ash from that eruption. Under the ash, which means people were living there, standing there, when the mountain blew. Their descendants watched it collapse. And they carried the memory of that day, mouth to ear, for roughly 7,700 years, until a geologist came along and confirmed that the story was true. There is no written language on Earth that old. The oldest writing we have is barely more than 5,000 years old. This is human memory reaching back further than writing itself. Think about what that means. These weren't just fables to scare children. They were data. A disaster manual encoded in legend, because a scary story survives longer in human memory than a dry list of instructions ever could. That is why we're like this, by the way. Your brain remembers a gripping story far better than a fact. That's not a flaw. It's the ancient backup system for knowledge too important to lose. And when the danger was too big to ride out at all, they simply left. Nomadic peoples read the seasons and moved with them, off the floodplain before the river rose, out of the valley before the dry season bit. Mobility was their insurance policy. The ability to walk away, in time, is a survival tool we've almost completely designed out of modern life. So let's add it all up. A sixth sense tuned to nature. Buildings that bend instead of break. A landscape re-engineered to tame water and fire. And a community that stored its survival knowledge in stories reaching back thousands of years and stayed light enough on its feet to run. That is not a fragile society. That is one of the most resilient systems human beings have ever built. And the strangest part is what happened next. We got powerful enough to think we didn't need any of it. Here in the modern world, we built something incredible, and something dangerously fragile. Think about how your survival actually works right now. Your water comes from one system of pipes. Your food comes from trucks that rely on one grid of power. Cut any one of those threads, and a whole city can be in real trouble within days. We traded 1,000 small, local, independent systems for a few enormous, efficient, centralized ones, and efficiency is wonderful, right up until the moment something breaks. Then everyone fails at once. The ancient systems were the opposite. They were decentralized. If one qanat collapsed, the village down the road still had theirs. There was no single switch that could turn off survival for everybody. That's called resilience, and we quietly gave a lot of it away in exchange for convenience. Here's the hopeful part. People are starting to remember, and not in a vague, poetic way. In concrete, city-budget ways. Take China's flooding cities. For years, the answer to a flood was more concrete, higher walls, bigger drains to shove the water away as fast as possible. It kept failing. So around 2013, Chinese planners launched something they call sponge cities. Instead of fighting the water, the city is redesigned to soak it up, with ponds, wetlands, and permeable ground that drinks the rain and releases it slowly. And where did the idea come from? From 2,000-year-old Chinese landscape design, the old networks of ponds and channels that villages used to hold water. Dozens of Chinese cities are now running on this ancient logic. Or take the qanat, that Persian desert tunnel. Of the roughly 120,000 historic qanats in Iran, something like 37,000 are still working today, still delivering water by gravity alone. And as heat waves get worse, engineers are looking at them with fresh eyes. In Seville, in Spain, planners are testing qanat-style underground channels to move cool air and water through the city to fight the killing summer heat. A 2,500-year-old desert technology being drafted to save a modern European city from climate change. Engineers in earthquake zones are studying how those Inca walls flex and building that same give into modern towers, exactly like the Skytree borrowed the pagoda's swinging heart. Fire agencies are finally partnering with indigenous communities to bring controlled burning back to the land. The future of surviving a disaster, it turns out, looks a lot like the deep past. But the deepest lesson isn't about any single technique. It's about a way of seeing. The ancient mind treated nature as something to move with, not something to conquer. It stayed humble. It stayed attentive. It assumed the disaster was coming, eventually, and it built a whole life around being ready. That instinct is still in you. It's the unease you feel before the storm, the pull to get outside, the story that stays with you longer than the spreadsheet. We didn't lose the survival wiring of our ancestors. We just paved over it and forgot it was there. So I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me, when's the last time you felt that ancient warning system fire? That inexplicable feeling that something was about to change? I read every single one, and those stories are the best part of doing this. And if this changed how you see the people who came before us, subscribe and stick around. Next time, we're going even deeper into the buried wiring, into the strange reason your brain treats a stranger as a threat and a familiar face is safe, a survival instinct from the age of small tribes that quietly runs your life today. It's one of the biggest reasons we're like this. I'll see you there.